Hey, welcome to our explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fundamental question. Just how reliable is our sense of right and wrong? We all like to think of it as this solid, fixed compass. But what if it's more like a mirage? Let's take a look. So, let me ask you something point blank. Do you think you're a good person? When you're up against a tough choice, do you trust that little voice in your head, that gut feeling, to point you in the right direction? I bet most of us would say, yeah, of course. We really want to believe that our morality is this fixed, dependable thing that always points to true north. And that's a really comforting thought, right? But what if it's not actually true? For the longest time, the main theory, especially in economics, was something called the simple model of rational crime. Basically, this model says we're all just logical calculators. When we decide to do something dishonest, like, say, fudge your taxes or pocket some extra pens from the office, we're just doing a simple cost-benefit analysis. What do I gain versus what's the chance I get caught? It's a clean, simple idea. But, as we're about to see, how we actually behave is way less rational and a whole lot more interesting. And this brings us right to our first big idea that blows that old model out of the water. It's a concept from behavioral economist Dan Ariely, and he calls it our inner fudge factor. So, to dig into this, researchers asked a pretty simple question. If you give good, normal, everyday people a crystal clear opportunity to cheat, how far will they actually go? Here's how they set it up. It was actually a pretty clever experiment. Participants got a sheet with a bunch of math puzzles and had 5 minutes to solve as many as they could. Now, in the control group, an experimenter would check their work and pay them for every right answer. Simple enough. But in the shredder group, things got interesting. Participants checked their own work, walked over to a paper shredder, destroyed the evidence, and then just told the experimenter how many they got right. It was the perfect risk-free chance to lie. So what happened? Well, the results were fascinating. The control group, the ones who couldn't cheat, they solved about 3 puzzles on average. But the shredder group? They claimed they solved an average of 5.5. So, okay, people were definitely cheating. But here's the really important part. They didn't cheat by a lot. Nobody walked up and claimed they solved all 20. And this right here is the fudge factor in action. People cheated just enough to get a little extra cash, but not so much that it would mess with their self-image. They could still look themselves in the mirror and think, yep, I'm still a good, honest person. As Dan Ariely himself puts it, we're basically caught in this tug-of-war. We really want to feel good about who we are. But at the same time, we want the perks that come with, well, bending the rules. And that fudge factor is what lets us have our cake and eat it too. Okay, so we know our rational mind can be flexible. But what happens when you throw powerful emotions into the mix? Well, that's when our moral compass really starts to spin. Psychologists have a term for this, the hot-cold empathy gap. It sounds complicated, but it's pretty simple. When we're in a calm, cool, rational, cold state, we are terrible at predicting how we'll actually act when we're in an emotional, hot state. We all like to think we do the right thing when the pressure is on, but in the heat of the moment, our logical brain often gets completely sidelined by our emotions. And there's no better example of this than something called the identifiable victim effect. Check this out. Researchers asked 2 groups of people for donations. They told one group about this massive, abstract problem, food shortages affecting 3 million children in Malawi. They told the other group a different story, the story of just one of them, Rokia, a 7-year-old girl from Mali who is facing starvation. And the results were just mind-blowing. People gave more than double the money to help Rokia, the single, identifiable girl. It's incredible, right? Our empathy, our moral trigger, it doesn't really fire for big statistics. It fires for a face, a story, an emotion. One single life facing danger feels more real and urgent to us than 3 million. So, it's pretty clear our moral compass is wobbly. It gets pushed around by our own self-deception and hijacked by our emotions. But it gets even weirder. What if I told you we could completely reset it with the simplest little trigger? This leads to a really wild question. Could we become more honest just by being reminded about honesty? It sounds almost too simple to work, doesn't it? Well, the researchers went back to that same math puzzle experiment. This time, they added a third group. Just like the shredder group, these folks had every chance to cheat. But before they started, they were asked to sign a statement acknowledging that they understood this was under the MIT honor system. The result was astounding. Cheating was completely eliminated. This group claimed to solve just 3 puzzles, exactly the same as the group that had no chance to cheat at all. And here's the kicker. This is the best part. MIT doesn't have an honor code. It never has. But it didn't matter. Just the idea of a moral code, just thinking about honesty for a split second right before the test, was enough to flip a switch and make people completely honest. So what is the big picture here? What does this all add up to? Let's put these pieces together and try to see past this moral mirage. The most important thing to take away from all this is that our moral compass isn't some fixed, reliable tool we can always count on. It's much more like a mirage in the desert. It shimmers, it shifts, and it changes depending on our mood and whatever's going on around us. So let's just recap what we've learned. First, we've all got that inner fudge factor that lets us cheat just a little bit. Second, our hearts often make decisions before our heads even have a chance to weigh in, especially when a single emotional story is involved. And third, our honesty can literally be switched on or off with the tiniest of reminders. It just goes to show you, our sense of right and wrong is way more flexible than we think. Now, I know this all might sound a little pessimistic or cynical, but it's really the opposite. Understanding that our moral gut feelings can be flawed is actually empowering. It's the very first step toward overcoming those flaws, toward being more mindful and making better, more conscious decisions. It's all about knowing when not to trust your gut. And that leaves us with one final, pretty challenging question to think about. If our own gut feelings can be a mirage, constantly shifting with the landscape of our lives, then how do we ever find our way to what's actually true and what's actually right?